Hello, Robbie Wong here, and I'm joined by my co-host,
This is Winston Wong.
and this is a conclusion video, hopefully, on, okay, good, Arena didn't crash. This is a conclusion video on Torbran as the commander for a Brawl deck. So, the deck list didn't change very much from maybe like the first two games were different, so we have a bunch of these smaller dorks, and Stonecoil Serpent is an honorary in both categories. We have slightly larger creatures, and then we have cards that buff them, and we have anthems, and then super buffs, super anthems. We have some grindy spells here, cards that generate other cards, and if given enough time and resources, can become 2 cards, 3 cards, 4 cards. And then all of Standard's all-star removal spells, because you can't play 4-ofs, but you do get to play a bunch of 1-ofs. So the conclusion was, if you're really into aggro and you're really into filling in that curve 1, 2, 3, or maybe you're a parent and you don't have a whole lot of time to play games, so you want to get a couple of quick best of ones in real quick, this is definitely a deck that can do that. It is speedy, it is aggressive. I was surprised occasionally by its mid to late game, but usually that meant that you drew Experimental Frenzy or Chandra and they went off. These cards are good and constructed, and they are darn good here in Brawl. So those cards, everything that's good in Standard, it's still good here. Torbran being able to play on turn 4 is hilariously fun. I mean, getting to 4 land drops with 24 lands in the deck, it's going to work out most of the time. And so you being able to guaranteed play this on turn 4 is one heck of a curve. So some of the killer draws would be one of these 1-drops, and then 2 more 1-drops, and then annex into Torbran. It's just some really good curves would occur if you happen to draw exactly the right series of cards.
And then they would be dead by turn 4.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally occasionally this deck is going to draw its nut draw or some combination of the nut draw, and then yeah, the game's over by turn 4.
So what was your win rate with this deck?
So on stream, we played 10 games and we won 8 of them, so that's like 80%. But off stream, for like getting to know the deck and figuring it out, we ended up playing about 29 games, and our win rate there was 76%.
That, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean that, you want to be winning, so winning more of the time than less of the time is good for your gamer's ego, the competitive side of yourself.
Yeah. And then the fact that you got 29 games in, that also speaks to how quickly the games went, right?
Yeah, I will say, when we were playing the other decks so far on stream, Niv Mizzet, Keenan, and Vito, the games are pretty long and everyone wants to try and play. That's great. The interaction's fine. With this deck, of those 29-ish, 30-ish games we played, 4 of them were, you played a basic mountain, I'm going to concede. Goodbye. So I am assuming that they kept hands that were not good against aggro, and as soon as they saw the mountain, they were out of there. So that only added to the speed of the deck and getting through the games. There are a couple of instant win gimmies.
So those are like the strengths and the benefits of this deck. So your losses, how did they happen? What are the weaknesses of this deck?
Okay, anything that has sweepers and you don't draw, where is he? If you're playing against sweepers and you don't draw Annex or Phoenix of Ash, it's gonna be a bad time. Any time it was, whether it was the 5-mana blue white board wipe, or oh, I'm blanking on the 4-mana 2 generic, 2 white. Anyways, any of those board wipes is a Shatter the Sky. Any
Yeah.
of those board wipes are just backbreaking if you've committed 3 whole turns into developing this board state that goes kaput. And there are some grindy elements over here, but not against dedicated control that draws its sweeper. So, like, for instance, 3 of those losses that added to the 76% win rate so far were against Teferi, like blue-white control. So
Yeah.
that's I think if you and again we were talking, like, the win rate is fine, right? Like 76% is, I mean,
It's
you
great.
you take that in almost any league, right? But if you were going to try and be better than control, you're probably going to have to give up some of your other successes in other areas, because if you keep adding to this column, the grindy elements, you've got to take that from somewhere, and so where do you take it from? Do you take it from your 1 drops, and then you are less likely to go turn 1 play, turn 2 play, turn 3 play? Do you take it from your anthem effects and lose the ability to keep these in the discussion on turn 3, turn 4? Do you take from these mid-sized creatures? Do you take from your removal suite? So oftentimes when you're looking at deck construction and what to do, I'll keep repeating this. This isn't my idea, but I've always believed in this concept, is you have to put in whatever is good, and you have to take out the fat. So if you're going to put in more control cards, what is it better than? What are you taking away? And does that significantly change your deck? I think there's a big difference between, and this is in constructed format too, these fast mono red decks versus the slightly bigger red decks that go later on in the curve. It's a different kind of game you're trying to play there.
Yeah. I mean, you don't sleeve up this deck and think, hey, I should play control. Because if you want to play control, there are better control decks than red control.
Yeah. Winston, the other card that's backbreaking, Dream Trawler. You don't have any wipes. You don't have any board wipes in this deck. So if there was only 1 game that an opponent played a Dream Trawler and I was able to play through it, and that was only because the Experimental Frenzy was just nuts, because you have to make up for the 3 to 6 point life swing that his life gain provides. So those Teferi games, I don't have it written down in my notes specifically, but I do remember this emotion of, okay, well, maybe if we, and then opponent plays Dream Trawlers and all your dreams are dashed.
They've been trolled successfully.
Yeah, there's and again, it's like red is not the color to fight Dream Trawler on. It doesn't really have the tools, right?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, yeah, your goal is to beat them before they land Dream Troll.
I mean, your best bet in the few games that like had turns would be like Phoenix of Ash or Everquill Phoenix, and have Fiery Emancipation out, so that way you could block and it would die naturally from combat damage. But that didn't happen. That's the out, but it didn't happen.
Yeah. All right.
Let's talk about cards to consider. So the current process that I go through is is there anybody else playing the deck, and are they doing better or worse than me, and what are those differences? So one of the things that I like to do is just hop into my collection here, hit not collected, pick the color that I'm interested, and just kind of go through, and with the filter of, if I'm putting something in, what needs to come out. So this is a good example. Before, the deck had another card in here. It was also 1 drop that gave haste. And I was looking at this card and I was thinking to myself, well, it's doing the same thing and it fills the same spot on the curve, but it has a little bit of recursion. So
Yep.
do I want that more than, and hopefully I can find it here later on. But yeah, I'll go through this and I'll look and I'll see, you know, like, oh, you know, Spewer, he generates for sure damage. Like he doesn't have to go to combat to deal his damage, and he synergizes really well with Chandra's Spitfire because he can guarantee the non-combat damage. But then he as a card is better in that way, but worse in that he doesn't combat, right? Like
Yeah,
Ember,
he's worse in every other way.
yeah, Embercleave and him don't go hand in hand. These Anthem effects don't go hand in hand. So it's I'll look at these cards, and, you know, like Tin Street Dodger, he's in a lot of mono red builds, you know, and maybe he's supposed to be in here more than Goblin Arsonist, you know, or Goblin Banneret because he has evasion. But those are cards that pop out as I'm flipping through here and thinking to myself, oh, you know, like do I want this? There was one game early on where I put Cavalcade of Calamity in here as just a reflex, but then this card doesn't synergize with like, well, you can do Burn Bright after the fact, but like Heraldic Banner and anything else that was buffing their attack. So it's their power, not their attack.
Yeah.
Chandra's Regulator, it was in an earlier version of this build, and I elected to put, I think, Risk Factor in here instead of this. I really enjoy cards that can serve a dual function. Like Tectonic Giant can attack, it can also be reach, and it can also be card advantage. But yeah,
do you have any?
Oh, go ahead.
Do you have any prowess?
Just where is he? Spellgorger weird.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so like Heartfire Immolator, right? That card up there in the upper left-hand corner. I mean, that's a card to consider too, right? Because he can attack for a bunch and get big, and then sacrifice himself and throw himself. You know, basically fling himself as removal. But you know, it's not hitting face, so that's not as great.
It's too bad. That's why he's an uncommon.
Fair enough.
And you know, this deck is kind of low on 2-drop creatures. You know, so that's whenever that question comes up in my mind, you know, what else can fit in here? Like Lava Coil, that's a good removal spell, but then it's not direct damage.
Right. Well, it's can't go to face.
Can't go to face. Scorching.
What about Omen of the Forge there that you just went by? That does go to the face. Yeah. Or is it too expensive?
I don't know. Maybe it's worth playing over Shock. You know, it has, for 1 more mana, you get a little bit more, but you lose the efficiency. You know, and I feel like a lot of these things are contextual too, in terms of what does the format look like? What are you going to be playing against? Like if you like this list of commanders, right? Like we played against Kudro, then Teferi, then Amaria, then Kudro, then Nicol Bolas, then Teferi, then Vraska, then Teferi again, then Brokos, then Yarok and Earl. You know, and not that that's like definitive or anything, but if you get really good at reading the terrain, then you're like, oh, you know what? There's a lot of Teferi running around, or there's a lot of Earl running around. I know that if I Scorching Dragonfire on the death trigger, he can be exiled.
Right.
You know, which makes Scorching Dragonfire better than Fire Prophecy. But Fire Prophecy, there was at least 2 games where the very bottom of the card became relevant. Not that 2 games is a big sample size, but had an experimental frenzy going on, and then the text mattered, like being able to bump the top of the deck.
I had a question, but I don't remember what it is now. Oh, yes. Any thoughts about playing against the Mirror, which I know you did at least once?
I highly highly recommend that you practice winning your die roll. so, so okay. Kidding aside, I feel like that's like a game of inches, right? Like you're both just punching each other in the face like rock'em sock'em robots, and then one person's gonna win, but they're not gonna look very good. So you want to stave off the early aggression, and then I feel like it's a race to Embercleave or letting your Torbran stick around. So whichever person can get to these cards first and have them stick around is going to win. And I feel like that has a lot to do with your opening hand and what you keep, so that way you can keep up with whatever the opponent's doing and get to those cards.
So if you sit down, you've got a Brawl deck, you sit down and your opponent is playing Torbran, what cards are like the key cards that you have to remove, when they play it?
I think Torbran is kill on sight. I think Annex, because he pairs so well with Embercleave, is kill on sight. I think you try and either trade off or combat trick them into getting these dorks here and saving your removal spells for the people who are going to really matter. And also like not keeping hands that are too full of the really expensive cards, because if you don't survive into the middle game, then it doesn't matter.
And if you have a board wipe, hold on to that, because at some point you're going to be facing a whole bunch of goblins and you want to get rid of them all at the same time.
Oh, okay. So then conversely, if you're playing against control, then in your opening hand, yeah, you want to try and run them out of the game because that's your plan. But
yep.
Cards that are really good against control. I had a Robber of the Rich on one of the games take a Teferi, and then the Teferi, the blue Teferi, the 4-drop, the new guy, and from M21, and he was filtering all the mountains into the graveyard and drawing me just gas. So like Robber of the Rich can be incredibly relevant in a long-term game where they can't deal with him and you get your hands lower than them. Punking them out with Embercleave, sticking a Fire of Emancipation, like Annex, as the aforementioned, not surviving board wipes, but making their board wipe less good.
Right, because you regenerate a bunch of creature citers afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, and it leaves less room for them to breathe, to get to more of because their average card draw is better than your average card draw. So your speed is going to be what saves you. I never got to activate this. I never got to have a board full of satyrs activate this and kill you. I would like to compliment Dwarven Mind in that this card never came in and mana screwed everything up. He always came down and made a dwarf and behaved.
Nice.
Legion Warboss did well.
Yeah. What about like Krenko?
Krenko back here. I don't know what he'd be better than. I really like this. Like I really like the curving Chandra into Torbran, so these guys are each punching in for 3. I like Phoenix of Ash. Everquill Phoenix was one that didn't make it into the constructed deck, but then seeing it here and then mutating onto one of these puny guys to soar over the top, this card ended up being worth it. And he's a little bit board wipe resistant because he can come back.
I was just thinking like Krenko is like Krenko the Street King campaign versus Legion Warboss, right? Those you can decide which is better there. Because often I noticed that you weren't attacking, or at least the one time you had Legion Warboss on, you weren't attacking with him, and you sort of need to with Krenko. But if you do, you get more, and Krenko grows himself.
Yeah. You know, what didn't end up happening very often was Chandra's Spitfire synergizing with the burn to sort of make that better. I think this slot might be up. You know, like I'm sorry, what am I saying?
Yeah.
I feel like this card Chandra really wants Cavalcade of Calamity
Yeah.
in order to really pop off and start borderlining as a combo deck. I think that slot is up for discussion. But yeah, you know, this is a fun
Did you
hobby of
have
mine.
any trouble with life gain decks?
Yeah, there was a couple times with Yarok, or not Yarok, Uro coming back in and gaining 3, 6, 9, 12. That I mean, this format already starts you off 5 life higher, so it's already more of an uphill battle, and he made that difficult. I never, now that you mention it, I don't believe the stream played against mono white. So the whole turn 1 Healer Hawk, turn 2 Pride Mate thing didn't happen.
Right.
So that's probably a challenging matchup. I mean, it was already. I mean, it's challenging in the constructed format, so I imagine it's a little bit trickier there.
I mean, you played against the deck that had the Johnny's Pride Mate and Orator.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that felt.
Yeah.
That felt like a losing race. They had really good draws.
I just like, is there any thought of playing Tibble, right? Because he prevents life gain.
Yeah, he's totally a he's totally a sideboard card that might have a spot in here. Maybe he's better than Chandra's Spitfire.
Possibly.
I mean, most of the time this was just a 1/3 flyer. Okay, but I mean,
yeah,
fun thought experiments, and that's one of the things I really like about Brawl, like,
and Magic in general.
Yeah, and it's like because it's a singleton format. Cards like Bolt Hound get to come out and play. You know, cards like Burn Bright, you know, get out to play, and that normally can't justify their space when there's 4-ofs. Like it's not worth the 3rd or 4th copy. But if you only get one, you know, you can you start to get a little bit more creative about the consistency of the deck because, you know, well, these are similar, right? So it's kind of like, you know, 1.5 slots of removal spells, 1.5 play sets, I meant.
So you have a couple of colorless creatures, the Ginger Brute and Stone Coil Serpent. They don't synergize with Torbran, right? Yeah, because Torbran requires red permanents to do it. How do they handle themselves?
You know what? Now that you mention that, I bet Ginger Brute is supposed to be the goblin with evasion. They're so similar, but then that they synergize. Stone Coil Serpent was relevant in the Teferi matchups.
Absolutely. I mean, Stone Coil Serpent is tech against Ugin, right? And Teferi and other planeswalkers that wreck your day.
Yeah, and the other thing is Stone Coil Serpent and any X spell like that, they Arena Crash. they fill the curve at any spot. You know, you draw him early game, he can pretend to be a 1-drop. You draw him late game, he can be a 6-drop. So I think that versatility is worth the loss of synergy with the rest of the red cards matter, like Heraldic Banner and whatnot. But yeah, now that you mention it and looking at it, Ginger Brute is probably supposed to be Tin Street Dodger.
Yeah, something red with haste and some sort of evasion.
Yeah,
Like
I mean
haste and menace would be great.
whoa, yeah. But I mean the two cards are so similar, and then the Ginger Brood is an artifact and gains you life. I mean that's not really the droid we're looking for here.
Right, because he's also food.
Yeah. So it's like yes, that's different, but within the framework of what this deck strategy is, I think you would rather the synergies with the Heraldic Banner and the other red cards and Torbran than you would the option to gain 3 life randomly late game when you're probably dead for other reasons.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to us. This was Robbie Wong.
And this is Winston Wong. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Any thoughts on what you're going to play next?
A green deck, and actually, this review is coming out after the first game of the new deck. So yeah, check that one out. We're starting with the mono green Stompy. We're going to work our way around the color wheel here.
Excellent.